In the world of board game media production, one man retains the integrity and tenacity to rise above the rest and compile the definitive list of the 100 best board games of all time. And that man, that legend, is Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower. And some guy named Chaz Marler's apparently made his own top 100 list. Because Tom asked him to.
No, I didn't.
Hey, Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise here, and welcome back to the next installment in my list of the top 100 board games of all time, according to my own personal, unique, individual experience. Thanks for joining me again, and today we are going to be counting down numbers 70 through 61. No more talking. Let's start fighting. Well, as one who now publicly acknowledges that he has read and complies with the top 100 countdown bylaws, I can say that RPGs are not qualified to appear on this list. What we're looking for is games produced by normal board game publishers and developers, which is why number 70 on my list is a game published by board game juggernaut Fantasy Flight Games. And this game by Fantasy Flight is their RPG End of the World. Loophole. What's this? Another RPG on my list? I was under the impression that you weren't sure whether or not you liked RPG games. And now this is a second one appearing on your list? Well, kind citizen, let me share with you what makes the End of the World RPG unique and why it's special enough to appear on my list.
Sounds great!
Excellent. Here's why. The End of the World RPG is a system that's supposed to be grounded in reality. There's still fantastical events that go off, like the old Greek gods may attack, or the dead may rise from the grave and attack, or other things may happen. It's the end of the world after all. But in it, players play themselves. The characters have no supernatural abilities. It's based on what you would do in extreme situations. Can that be fun, you may ask? Well, the answer is yes, and here's why. I played the End of the World RPG at Board Game Geek last year with a circle of friends, and even there, sitting within the convention hall together, with all the noise and all the people surrounding us, this RPG session was still one of the most tense, anxiety-filled, nerve-wracking, immersive RPG sessions I have ever experienced in my life. The fact that you are playing yourself, and that even though fantastical things are going off, it's still grounded in reality as much as possible, actually makes the experience that much more intense. Of course, the quality of every RPG experience depends on your co-players and the abilities of the game master who's controlling the game. But boy howdy, I lucked out in this play session, because that session of the End of the World RPG made such an indelible impression in my gaming history that it strongly comes in at number 70 on my list of my top 100 board gaming experiences of my entire life. Alright, number 69 on my list is a game that I discovered shortly before it came out, and then it was canceled, and then I forgot about it, and then it was resurrected, and then I spent several months trying to track down and remember what this game was when it finally hit retail. And what game is this? I've forgotten again. Just kidding. The game that has this strange legacy behind it is Pirate Den. Pirate Den is a pretty straightforward, simple little game. Each player around the table is a pirate who is collecting gems for their own personal stash. But before you can bury them in your own personal stash, there's a chance that they could be stolen by the other fellow pirates around the table. There's also a stash of gems in the center of the table that everyone is mutually taking from. Now, everybody has the same hand of several cards, and on your turn, you're going to be playing a card from your hand. Kind of like in Libertalia, where every player has the same hand of cards, it's just the order that you're playing them is going to determine how varied and different this game becomes. Now, the version that I have is published by Crash of Games, but the game originally was not going to be part of their catalog. From my understanding, it was going to be published by someone else, and they ran a Kickstarter. And the way that I discovered this game was right before or during that Kickstarter, Friend of the show and fellow media creator Scott Morse of Crits Happen actually took his camera to a convention that year and filmed a playthrough of everyone enjoying this game. I saw his video and I was hooked. And then something went horribly wrong and I believe the Kickstarter imploded and the game was never produced. And then, a long time later, I encountered this announcement by Crash of Games stating that they were picking up this game from an abandoned Kickstarter and were going to salvage it and publish the game. And after I read the description of it, boom! All these memories just flooded into my mind and I realized this is that game from Scott's video from way back when. So as soon as I could, I scooped up a copy of Pirate's Den, brought it to the table, and had just as much fun playing it as I always thought I would based on that original video. It's quick, it's pretty light, and there's just that right blend of, oh man, I was just about to use that and you took it away from me, to make this game something I really enjoy. Alright, before I can speak about number 68 on my list, I need to offer a disclosure. I think it's important to disclose that I work with the company that published number 68 on my list, Quartz. And I mention this to you, gentle viewer, because I'm sure that you agree as much as I do that a content creator's integrity is paramount to their reliability as a broadcaster. Because if I was to come out here and just artificially praise Quartz, it would ruin my integrity as a media personality instantaneously. And that's why I'm so excited to share the fact that since I've been playing Quartz, my teeth have gotten whiter, I've discovered oil in my backyard, a small European country has elected me their king, and I've unlocked the mysteries of time and space to control all matter and reality. Thanks, Quartz. Okay, actually, I do enjoy Quartz, but I've discovered that it's not a game for everybody. Perhaps it's that I grew up playing Risk with a lot of random dice rolling, but I've discovered that I tolerate a lot more randomness and chaos in my games than I think the average player does. And I think that's the main frustration that a lot of players run into with Quartz. You see, in Quartz, all the players are dwarves pulling gems out of this mine. And the mine is represented by this cloth bag. And in this bag, there's about 18 worthless gems called obsidian. They're actually bad for you, along with a bunch of other colored gems as well. And on each player's turn, one of the actions that they can take is to go mining, represented by pulling something out of the bag. Now, you're either going to pull out a gem and score points, or you're going to pull out a black obsidian and receive a penalty. In fact, as soon as a player obtains a second obsidian, they're out of the rest of that round. So, through very little fault of their own, a player could be ejected from the rest of the round after taking just their first two actions. 1 obsidian, 2 obsidian, see you next round. Now, there are some things built into the game to help mitigate this, but it is possible to have 2 strikes and you're out. And like I said, I think I'm tolerant of a little more randomness and chaos in my games than the average user, so I'm actually okay with this and I still greatly enjoy the game. In fact, it's currently my family's game of choice. But that said, I still see room for there to be a little bit of house ruling or tweaking to the rules to make it more enjoyable for a wider range of gamers. And that's okay, because that's what games are all about, is finding ways to have fun with the people around you, right? But even as it stands straight out of the box, I still enjoy Quartz enough that it joins my whitened teeth and I at number 68 on my list. Alright, I have a confession. Can we get a little confession mood music, please? That's nice. Okay. Back in 2012, when I was just starting to get back into the modern board gaming scene, my gateway, my doorway, my reintroduction was through the Dice Towers videos. And yes, I was one of those individuals that would watch Tom's reviews not only to learn about the current game he was speaking about, but also to scan the library of games on his shelves behind him to look for neat new games that I would go and research to find out more about. And a game that I watched his review of early on and would always see sitting there on his shelves in his other reviews, staring at me, taunting me, was Manila. Manila is kind of a betting game where you have these boats loaded up with different spices and whatnot going down this little river. And the crux of the game is that players are betting on when and where each of the boats will arrive in port. Now, the only thing that made my yearning for this game stronger than seeing it sitting on Tom's shelves video after video was the fact that it was also out of print. And so I would sit, Manila-less, yearning. Well, one day, someone at my game club brought the game to our meeting, so I jumped on the opportunity to play it, and I enjoyed it very much. But not as much as I thought I would. And I'll tell you why. Each time a boat loaded with a certain spice makes it all the way to the end of the river in first place, that spice is moved up on this little point track. And when any spice reaches a certain threshold, that's what triggers the game's end. Which is cool, but if all of the boats crash or meet an ill fate on their way down the river, no spice lands, and therefore nothing goes up the little point track. Meaning, if you have several dozen really bad rounds in a row, it's possible for none of the spices to move up the track, therefore the game doesn't move towards its conclusion, and the game could technically go on forever. And guess what happened during our game of Manila? We must have played this game for hours longer than the estimated play length that's written on the box. And it's just because the right boats weren't making it to port to trigger the end of the game. Now this could be rectified easy enough by instituting a house rule saying that if no boats reach port, all of the spices on that track all move up together one increment. And voila, you have an instant countdown where you know the game is definitely going to end after X number of rounds. Which, coincidentally, was the house rule that was developed during the blood pact that formed by the players of that game while we were all waiting for it to end. But potential infinite loop or not, I still found Manila to be worth waiting for enough that it still finds its way onto this list of my favorite games of all time. Now, number 66 on my list is a tile-laying game in which players are building a city in an infinite number of combinations together. Hence the name, Infinite City! At this point, Infinite City has been around for a little while, so it doesn't have the hotness that's drawing people to it, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of people. I like the amount of interaction that players have together, the way that the tiles that you lay can interact with the rest of the city, and I enjoy its scoring system. How much do I enjoy Infinite City? Well, enough that there's only like 65 other games that I can think of that I'd rather play than it right now, this moment. And let's find out what number 65 is next. Speaking of things that are infinite, Arkham Horror. Arkham Horror is a really good game that won't be appearing on my top 100 list because my yearning to play it has been completely replaced by Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror is pretty much like Arkham Horror Take 2. In the game, players play globe-trotting adventurers who are traveling the globe, shutting gates, fighting monsters, and preventing an ancient elder god to come and just mess up things on the planet for everybody. Now, Eldritch Horror is not without some of the issues that can affect Arkham Horror. There's more and more expansions being released for Eldritch Horror, and the first time that my group played Eldritch Horror, we played it with the full complement of players, and the game took 7 hours. To be fair, I don't think that's typical, but so that's number 65 on my list, Eldritch Horror. Do I enjoy the game? Yes. Would I play it again? Yes. But would I definitely schedule an entire afternoon just around the activity? After my previous experience, yes. Speaking of games that you can schedule an entire afternoon around, is number 64 on my list, Archipelago. Now, Archipelago was kind of a pleasant surprise the first time I played it, because I went in thinking it was just going to be a tile exploration, market management type game. But what I discovered was that there were more opportunities within the game to mess with people than I thought there would be. Now, in Archipelago, there's not really any direct player-to-player confrontation going on, but it is possible to do things that really gum up the works of the plans of the other players. In essence, it is possible to play Archipelago as a jerk. And I guess that I'm really a sucker for any game where you are building up your own little kingdom with the possibility of messing with other people while you do it. And not just for the sake of messing with other people and ruining their fun, but to build a story together, and I found that Archipelago provided the opportunity to make that blend. And that's why the experiences that I've had with Archipelago so far have brought it to its current position on my list of top 100 games. In various previous videos, I have spoken not only about how I was introduced to board gaming by Risk, but how my best friend was introduced to board gaming through Axis and Allies. So when it came to board games, we always had this common expectation that any game is going to have handfuls and handfuls and handfuls of little plastic pieces to be pushing across the map and throwing at each other while you rolled dice. Which is why when we first played Quartermaster General together, we kind of stopped, puzzled. This is a game that provides less than a dozen units per player. And when I revealed the title Quartermaster General to my friend, his initial reaction was, "What? Quartermaster General? You mean like the guy who's in charge of like the paperwork for managing supplies?" And yes, that's the fundamental idea behind Quartermaster General. Not that you're building as many units as possible to throw at your opponent, but that you're managing your supply lines. So here you are, playing the part of all of the armies involved in World War II, and instead of producing as many tanks as you possibly can, you're making sure that all of your tanks have a supply line back to your home base, and that you can use the few precious resources that you have available to accomplish all of the objectives that you have to do in order to defeat the enemy. It still provides that risk, Axis, and allies feel, but it does it with a completely opposite approach. To say it was a pleasant surprise to both of us is an understatement. It has quickly become the first game that we will pull off the shelf and play a session of whenever we get together. I think it's a combination of not only the different approach that Quartermaster General takes to a World War II board game, but also the fact that it's become the go-to game that my best friend and I will play a session of first every time that we get together, why Quartermaster General reaches number 63 on my top 100 list. Another game that my best friend and I will play every time we get together is Seven Wonders, which isn't my favorite. In fact, if spoilers weren't specifically prohibited by the top 100 countdown bylaws, I would confess to you that Seven Wonders won't even appear on my top 100 countdown list at all. Boy, I'm glad I finally took the time to read this. Boy, I would have hated to have done that wrong. No, to me, Seven Wonders has been completely replaced by Among the Stars. Similar to Seven Wonders, it's a card drafting game where each player has a hand of cards, you pick one, and you pass the rest of your cards around the table until you end up with a completely new set of cards, which you'll then play that round. But while I do enjoy Seven Wonders enough to always play it whenever it hits the table, there's something about the game that just seems a little too abstract to me. I don't know. But in Among the Stars, even though it's powered by basically the same mechanisms, I feel like I'm actually building a space station and doing something with my cards instead of just abstractly playing them for resources. And that's why Among the Stars has edged out Seven Wonders to the point where, given the choice, I'd probably always pick Among the Stars over Seven Wonders. But I do see the two games as being almost distant cousins to each other, but not closely related enough that I'd let the two games share this spot on my list. Besides, I've learned that's strictly prohibited. No studying. And that is the story behind the story of why Among the Stars, and Among the Stars alone, comes in at number 62 on my list. One of the neat things about being involved in board game media creation is the neat relationships that you get to form and subsequently accidentally destroy. You see, at Gen Con 2015, Marty Connell from Rolling Dice and Taking Names partnered up with Rodney Smith of Watch It Played in a Hiroshima Hex tournament, where the two of them took on and subsequently lost horribly to their opponents. But the important part of this story is that Marty and Rodney were a Hiroshima Hex well-oiled team. Time passes. Eventually, BGG Con 2015 rolled around, and one of the events advertised to partake in at BGG Con that year was another Hiroshima Hex tournament. And about that time, I bumped into Rodney Smith, who was also going to BGG Con, so the topic of this new Hiroshima Hex tournament came up. And lo and behold, by the end of the conversation, Rodney had agreed to become my partner for this upcoming tournament, and so he and I were going into the Hiroshima Hex tournament together, as partners. Now, of course, it's possible that Marty felt that I was stealing his partner, but, I mean, really, enough time had gone by since Gen Con that I don't even think he thought about it.
When does the pain stop?
It never does. You just have to move on.
So there Rodney and I were at BGGCon 2015, playing this Niroshima Hex tournament together, defeating one team after another, and eventually we found ourselves winning our way all the way to the final round. And in this final championship round, guess who our opponents would be? The team of Marty Cannell and Tony McCree. They were rolling dice and taking names and out for revenge. And what would happen next? Why, the only thing that could happen next, we ran out of time. And so the four of us forever hang in limbo, not receiving closure to that question that hung in the air of which of these two teams really was the ultimate Niroshima Hex force. I doubt anyone even remembers. But what I do remember is why Niroshima Hex is number 61 on my list, because it is a neat kind of area control that almost adds a puzzle element to the gameplay. You can play it 2 players or 2 teams of 2 against each other, and the game always keeps you on your toes. There's always a new tactical decision that you have to make every time your turn comes around. What's more, Niroshima Hex benefits from a fantastic app that's available on the iPad that I highly recommend. In fact, at this point, I've played Niroshima Hex on the iPad more than I've played the actual physical version of the game. But thanks to Niroshima Hex's unique area control and combat system, it earns its place at number 61 on my list. And hey, just like that, we're through numbers 70 through 61 on the list of my favorite board games of all time. How do the games in this section of my list compare to those on your own list? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, for more board game news, reviews, and commentary, be sure to subscribe to both the Dice Tower and the Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channels. And after doing that, come check us out on Facebook and Twitter as well to continue the conversation. Until then, I've been Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise, saying thanks, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Man, these losers, they will never get past this impregnable defense. You know what I mean?
No, this isn't right. We can't do this. We can't do this.
Yeah, we can. This is how we win.
No. Here's why.
Oh, why?
Board Game Media Laws, Article 39, Section 23, Paragraph 8, Subsection C, Bullet II, and I quote, creators will not overuse a running gag. Failure to comply may result in reduced humor, smaller audience, dizziness, nausea, and loss of control of, well, really bad stuff.
But wait, isn't that a running gag?